Hello and welcome to the Small Business Briefing. I'm Brian Calley, CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sarah Miller with the Small Business Association of Michigan. Thank you for joining us for today's briefing. And of course, thank you to Consumers Credit Union. Consumers Credit Union has a variety of options when it comes to both business and personal accounts, and they have nearly 30 locations in Michigan. You can visit consumerscu.org to learn more. So Brian, we do have a special guest joining us today. I'll turn it over to you to introduce her and kick off that conversation.
All right, very good. Thanks, Sarah. And this is something that we've actually over the last couple of years covered quite a bit, and that's childcare. As we look at labor force participation rates and our desire to see that move up, we know that one of those pieces is childcare and access to high quality and reliable childcare for and affordable childcare for our population. And that is it's been kind of a race, something that we've been chasing, but something that the Whitmer administration has really made a priority and worked closely with the business community and to advance over the last several years. And it really did kind of come to a head, if you will, throughout the pandemic. And you saw how important the role that schools played in childcare as well. But now as we kind of enter into the new, this new normal, there's been a lot of things that have been happening in this space, really with an eye toward making sure that families and kids have the support they need, but also that people have access to the workforce. So Michelle Richard is joining us today. She's been just a wonderful friend to our association and our members in being available and accessible and for these types of discussions, for policy discussions and changes as we've been going through all these changes. So first, Michelle, thank you for joining us on the small briefing today. And maybe just a little bit of an overview of what you do within the administration and why the childcare has been made such a priority for you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me and for the association for really championing childcare. It's been incredible to see our small businesses really leading on this issue and frankly recognizing what a challenge it is for so many of their employees. But my job within the Whitmer administration is quite broad. And so I am a senior education advisor for the governor. I work on all of our early childhood policy, a bit of K-12 with my partner, Stephanie O'Day, and then lead our education, our higher education work as well. A really big piece of that equation has been childcare. How do we make sure that more Michigan families have access to quality, affordable childcare that meets their needs? Whatever that looks like. And we've certainly been fortunate to be able to leverage some pretty significant federal dollars over the past two and a half years to really make sure that more families can go to work, can go to school, knowing that their children have safe places. And we really try to think about that. It's childcare, how we might imagine it in a center or in a home. It's after school care for school-age children. It's preschool for our 3 and 4-year-olds. So whatever word you use, if that's a safe place that your child is while you're working or going to school, those are the spaces that we've been really trying to support over the past few years to make sure they're available to you and that they're places that your kids actually want to spend their day.
So let's start with maybe a status report in the landscape. A lot has changed in the last few years. Some progress has been made, but also gaps that were exposed throughout all the drastic changes in the economy overall. So just set the stage for us.
Yeah, it's been an incredible few years for our child care providers, many of whom are small businesses themselves, as they've been fighting the same challenges that your members have to keep their doors open, to keep their service and their product, that support for young kids and their families as high quality, as affordable as possible. And it's been really energizing to feel like these organizations are able to get back to their core mission, supporting kids, educating, building young minds, and working with families to make sure that there's a product or an option that really works with their lives. I know you do Data Monday at the end of this segment, but it was just about 1 year ago that the governor and lieutenant governor announced a project called Caring for My Future, which is really about how do we open more capacity in our childcare system. We knew that families couldn't find the care that they needed. There were too many wait lists. And so we've been really working for the past year with a $100 million appropriation from the legislature and a ton of energy from our departments, the Department of Education, the Department of Licensing, to really say, how do we open more businesses? How do we help them expand so that they're serving more kids? And how do we help brand new sites open? And we're going to be announcing in the next month or so that we've had over 2,300 sites either open or expand, which means we just have so many more options available to families. To be clear, not meeting every single need. We know there are still communities that don't have enough childcare, and it's been really energizing to see new collaborations come out of, business and community partnerships, business partnerships, community leaders, small business owners really trying to step into that space to say, I can provide a service that meets a need in my area. So certainly better, I think, than the last time that we talked, but certainly more work to do.
So you referred to some of the players that are involved. Maybe just provide a little color on the things that are happening. I know there are individual programs, some really cool collaborations that are happening. I know that we've had many of our members in the business that have connected in with that kind of one-stop shop on expanding. And I can't even tell you what type of feedback that we've had and how positive it is for people to be able to connect in and it to be so accessible. A person that works kind of in the regulatory field to say, to take it on. Emily Laidlaw happens to be the person's name, but so for Emily to say, instead of being looking at it like a regulator, instead my job is to help you kind of get through the process and make sure that compliance and meeting all the requirements of opening a new center, expanding a new center, adding, to the capacity that you have is as easy as possible, because it's still it's a highly regulated industry, as childcare needs to be. So some big wins, but maybe touch on some of the programs that have been launched and how they're going.
Yeah, so two things we'll talk about. Let's talk about access first, and then we'll come back to affordability. So I mentioned Caring for My Future, which is where this idea of a one-stop shop came. We know that entrepreneurs are busy people. They are trying to look for opportunities in the market, and they're running a business at the same time. How can we make it just a little bit easier to be able to navigate all of the steps that it takes to become licensed? We all want kids to be in places that are safe from a fire, who have staff that are trained, places where they have health and safety procedures in place. And now within our team at Childcare Licensing and Lara, we have navigators that really work one-on-one with new entrepreneurs or existing entrepreneurs who are expanding to say, here is everything you need to do along the way, so that we can help you get through that process. As a state, we need more providers to open. So we're really motivated, especially for the folks who are already a part of the system and have a proven track record. We want to help them open a second site. We want them to help them expand their capacity. And we've seen a ton of success in those calls. And that's something we're looking to sustain longer term past this one-time federal money, because we recognize that we need to both regulate and be part of that concierge recruitment team that's also trying to bring new partners into the market. When it comes to affordability, we know it doesn't matter if there's childcare in your community if it's outside of your budget. So the governor's really been working to expand access to a program we call the Child Care Subsidy, sometimes called the Child Development and Care Program, but this is the program that helps lower income families access lower, no cost childcare. We are finally back to pre-pandemic enrollment. So we serve 33,000 kids right now whose families have lower, no cost for their childcare, and we know we can do better. So we're actually in market right now. If you're watching us on Facebook Live, we hope you're also seeing ads promoting childcare subsidies so that we can connect working families, families who are going to school, with options that might be available to you. And I know so many of you have worked with our friends at Leo to be able to get information about subsidies so you can connect employees who might qualify back with this opportunity. Then we know that that's not the right fit for every employee, and that once you break that income requirement, families still struggle. So I know the governor's office has been incredibly proud of the work we've done through TriShare. And I know SBAM has been such a fantastic partner there, trying to say, how can we not go to no cost, but how can we make childcare just a little bit more affordable for that family budget? And right now, TriShare serves 59 different counties. We have had hundreds of businesses raise their hand and say, I want to be a part of this. As a reminder, TriShare is a program where families, the employer, and the state split the cost of childcare 3 ways. So for that family, they're now paying a third of the cost. Their employer is kicking into the third of the cost, and the state is kicking in a third. That program is still small, and we are working to grow because we've just seen really incredible interest from employers saying, we think this is something we can do to help bring, like you mentioned at the top, new people into the labor market, help people take on bigger roles within businesses that they already work on. And we're really delighted and anxious to work with more partners who are on this call to be able to bring TriShare to more families and more employers.
So if a person was, and I think we'll have to make this kind of the parting thought of our conversation here. Thank you so much, Michelle, for being with us. Is the if a business owner, maybe certainly has heard us talk about TriShare for the last couple of years, as it spreads across. How does somebody know? First of all, is it in my county? And second of all, if they want to participate, make this a benefit of their for their workforce as they're trying to recruit and retain talent, how would they go about just getting started?
Yeah, absolutely. So best way, michigan.gov/MI TriShare, TRI share. It's where you can get some of that really basic information, and we'll make sure to get a basic info packet out to Sarah and your team so we can blast it out to the SBAM community, because we'd love to have a conversation. We have a really fantastic team that's ready to talk to you about whether this is the right fit for your business.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much, Michelle, for
My
joining
pleasure.
us and for being such an awesome partner.
Same. Thank you.
All right. Yes. Thanks, Michelle. So Brian, we're going to move on to a couple other topics before we get to Data Monday. We have some maybe good news around new business starts. What can you tell us?
Yeah, we've been talking for a couple of years on just the way that businesses or the people have responded to the uncertain economic times and deciding to just start that new business. And this is a chart that was put together by the Detroit Free Press in a story that they did, and I wanted to share it before we'll get into more broadly Data Monday. But this graph shows you total new business applications. This would be those who filed for tax ID numbers with the IRS, is what this is saying. And this would be for sole proprietors and for businesses that expect to have employees. And you'll see that when the pandemic hit, there was a big spike. And I'm sure that that's a record. While this graph only goes back to 2005, we never saw a month where there were 20,000 new business starts. And yet that when kind of the rest of the world shut down and a lot of people just took that plunge at that point. And you'll notice that the new business starts kind of trailed off and settled in at a new level, but still way higher than before. Before, as the economy recovered after the Great Recession, we saw a great kind of gradual increase that happened year after year after year. But where it's settled now is literally thousands per month more than before. And there's probably a lot of different reasons for that, Sarah. I mean, there's one of the things that I was looking at some statistics that a lot of those that are operating as independent contractors and are their kind of own small businesses are actually doing it as a supplement to a W-2 job, according to, again, to IRS records, that many individuals have a small business and have a W-2 job. And that's more possible these days for more professions than ever has been because of flexible and remote work environments, and people don't necessarily have to pick between the two. So I think it'll take a while for us to see how that shakes out over time in terms of whether or not those side businesses turn into full-time businesses that end up hiring employees and kind of looking more like what we'd consider a traditional small business, or if they're individuals that are very content to have that base W-2 income and supplemental contractor income on the side. It's one of the reasons, though, when you look at that graph, and it's an impressive new business starts, so many of those people are operating as independent contractors, and that is so good for Michigan. It's an awesome advantage that we have, that there are so many entrepreneurs that are taking advantage of the demand in the economy and putting their skills to work in that way. But it's the reason that we're so concerned about proposed rules for independent contractors that would restrict the circumstances when a person can operate as an independent contractor, or when a customer could buy services from an independent contractor, both of those being big concerns. You look at the status quo, though, the way the rules are now, you can see that they are obviously highly favorable to people starting their own businesses. If it's not broke, don't fix it.
I think it's pretty fitting that it is National Small Business Week this week as well. So that's a great stat to share in a week that we are celebrating our small businesses and our small business owners and entrepreneurship.
Absolutely.
Yes. So let's take another news story. This one just came out today that JP Morgan Chase is buying First Republic. What does this mean going forward?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, if you are a bondholder or a stockholder of First Republic Bank, sorry, you will be losing everything. There's not when the FDIC takes over a bank, it's a fire sale. And what that means is that they essentially give the assets of the bank to another bank. And in this case, JP Morgan Chase, which is enormous, one of the biggest banks in America, that is among the biggest in the world, absorbing First Republic Bank in a lot of ways to the FDIC. I'm sure this was very attractive, because it just nobody has to worry about whether or not JP Morgan Chase can handle a further run on the deposits of this bank. But I mean, you actually saw a pretty immediate increase in the stock price of JP Morgan, because they got a bank for free. Normally banks have to pay a lot, like huge premiums for a bank, and this is one that had it was not a traditional bank failure. You saw a run on the bank, so deposits left, and they continued to leave. They topped out at almost 180 million last year, and they lost like 100 million in deposits. So deposits are a bank's liabilities. So that means that like their liabilities were getting called, if you will. They didn't have the liquidity to support their assets, and their assets, a lot of them were like big mortgages and loans to high net worth individuals at low rates. When interest rates went up, the net present value of those mortgages and loans at very low rates went down. And so it created a scenario where there were essentially book losses for that bank. And so the FDIC essentially covered the losses for on those book losses, and then gave the assets to JP Morgan. So if you are a bondholder or a stockholder of First Republic Bank, you will not come out ahead on this. This is a transaction that essentially means you walk away with nothing. For pretty much everybody else, this might signal the end of the kind of like financial crisis or banking crisis that started a few months ago with a couple of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank. The other banks that were kind of on that worry list seem to have shored up their liquidity position pretty well. There are a lot of rate pressures in the market. The big question now in my mind, so banking crisis kind of and the immediate impacts of that, or the most dramatic impacts now dealt with this final transaction. The big question now is, will the Federal Reserve do what they had suggested they would do, which increase interest rates? Every time they do that, what it does is it means the net present value of the assets that banks own goes down. And will keeping more banks out of trouble trump the concern that they have about inflation? That's an open question. Now that I look to me like they're feeling pretty good that they got this behind them, but in terms of immediate bank failures that they've got behind them, and maybe they'll decide to cool it on the interest rate increases to not upset the apple cart. But inflation is still pretty sticky. That core inflation still, it's come down, but it's still at an uncomfortably high level, and it seems to be just hanging out there at a place that normally you'd see the Federal Reserve continue to increase interest rates.
Okay, so one more story before we get to Data Monday, and this is about General Motors, and they need to cut $2 billion. So what's the plan?
Yeah, General Motors had previously announced that they, in the next 2 years, intended to cut a couple $1 billion out of their operating expenses. They did voluntary layoffs, and about 5,000 people were let go. Contract employees at the Warren Tech Center, they are letting hundreds of them go. I don't know exactly how much. The news story said hundreds. And they expect that in the first year, they'll reach 50% of their goal of cutting out $2 billion in expenses. So this is one of those areas where, like a warning sign, if you will. It's important that the state not go back down the road of reassembling a huge dependence on the automotive industry. And I think there's just another reminder of why it is risky to put all your eggs in one basket. It's one of the reasons why the new business starts are so important in Michigan and our future, as we see some of the corporate giants probably continue to ratchet down.
All right, now let's take a look at Data Monday.
All right, I'm going to share the screen again, and what I want to do is to go through each of these items and kind of logically tell the story. The first is U.S. personal income. So we do see that on the top you've got the overall personal income, and then at the bottom you see it net of inflation. And so you see that it's positive until you factor in inflation, and then at that point it pretty much wipes out the income. And you'll see some impacts of that, which are carried through and are kind of expressed in a bunch of different ways. First, I wanted to cover the personal consumption expenditure inflation numbers. So these would be the cost of items that we buy as end consumers. So not the business to business transactions. That's overall inflation, looks at the rising cost of everything. This, the personal consumption, or the PCE, the core and the overall, as you can see, that core, which is in orange, is it has come down some, but now is higher than the overall PCE inflation, just like the headline and the core numbers and the overall inflation. If you look at it month by month, you'll see more clearly that, if it was just, if you looked at the overall numbers, it actually looks like it's come down pretty well. But if you look at in orange, the core numbers, when you take out those commodity items, that move pretty quickly. the up and down, you could talk yourself into a downward trend, I guess, here. It's coming down, but if you're to look back at previous months, it's actually higher than if you go back another quarter. So it's sticky and complicated. It's not clearly in a downward trend, other than when you look at it from a year ago. Now, looking at the overall, the reason why, by the way, is because the overall cost of employment is going up. And while it has rolled over, as you can see, it's starting to come back down. The overall employment cost of civilian workers, so non-government workers, it has come down slightly, but is still historically really high. As long as this is the case, you're going to see that sticky part of the inflation stay a little bit higher. Looking at personal income, wage and salary disbursements, this is a little different than the previous. The previous was with benefits, okay, the cost of employment overall. This one is just looking at wage and salary. And you can see that the overall percentage is still pretty high. Again, it's come down some, but still in a relatively high position at 5.58%. And then in the leisure and hospitality industry, this one has also come down quite a bit from its high. You can see it got quite high, double-digit increases. Now, this downward the downward trend in this graph, it does not mean that wages have decreased in this industry. It does not mean that. It means that it increased, but by half as much as before. So year over year, a 5.67% increase, as opposed to at one point the increases were 10%. And then the personal savings rate have actually started to tick up. And this is kind of an inverse type of a relationship when it comes to recessionary concerns. So the personal savings tend to trend up during times of economic uncertainty and when people are concerned about recession. It's viewed by some economists as being a predictor of a recession, is when these rates go up. So people aren't feeling as secure. They don't spend as much. They want to sock a little bit more away. Still relatively low savings rates, though, overall, which of course has something to do with inflation. And then the last thing I wanted to cover, which was published by Bloomberg, is by generation, how many people this year compared to a year ago, March of 23 compared to March of 22, are living paycheck to paycheck. And you'll see that baby boomers and seniors, there's fewer of them living paycheck to paycheck as compared to a year ago. But flip that over and look at Gen Z, the youngest generation in the workforce, you'll see more people from 58 to 65% that are living paycheck to paycheck. Those in the middle, millennials, Gen X, pretty much stay the same. Little modest differences there. But baby boomers and Gen Z having exactly opposite experiences when it comes to living paycheck to paycheck. And that is, by the way, one of the reasons why you would see generally dissatisfaction with that generation, even in the face of wage increases. We saw how it looks on the graph. You can get increases in wages, but if all the costs go up, then you see no more left at the end of the day.
All right, well, thanks, Brian, for the Data Monday report. We will be back here Thursday at 3 p.m. Happy National Small Business Week, and have a great week.
Thanks, everybody. Support small business.